We were talking earlier about the War Powers Act, and I understand that has a 30-day cap, assuming the 30-day cap is granted, the extension. What would happen then, right? Now, I've said this before, the blockade can to continue to function outside of that because it could be like a terrorist operation. We're just stopping terrorism. We're stopping the armament. It would be like Cuba. You don't want Cuba to have these missiles, so we're keeping the blockade, and the blockade is going to go on indefinitely. That's something that absolutely can happen. Now, that's also the problem that was with Cuba, that the government doesn't care how much their people suffer. They don't care if the people have to go from cars to horse and buggies. They don't care about that. So without the kinetic pressure, there might be a situation where they just go down from third world to fourth world to fifth world. You understand what I'm saying? And they just fight to keep power. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but I'm just saying that there are operations that can continue despite the end of the War Powers Act, even if the 30-day cap is affirmed, continues, and passes. There's still things that can be done. Another thing is that border thing. I think what he would be saying when he talks about the area of the border is that they don't have to be resupplied by sea. It would be suggesting that they would be getting resupplied by land. And that's what those two lines were about. Like saying, we can get from trains, we can get pipes to get our oil and our gas out and get money from getting that out through pipes. So, what I would think about that is economic fury would have to look into what countries around Iran are resupplying it to buy land. That would be my only response to that, because that would be like, why is he talking about this? Why is he talking about the borders? Right? It would be because he's being resupplied by land. That's the only thing I can think of. It's a threat that, like, oh, your blockade doesn't matter because we can just go around it by land. And that's where my two main points. Like, operations can continue, even kinetic operations, because through some things that have to do with terrorism, as long as it's not an ongoing, sustained campaign, and we're not keeping a large amount of troops there, we can continue. We've done this in Yemen with the Houthis. We've done this in many areas. It's something that can continue. We didn't use the War Powers Act when we went to Venezuela. We could just strike at certain moments. So there is the thing that the blockade can continue. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that they'll lose power. It just guarantees that they will get more desperate with holding power and oppress the people more and lower their standard of living more. And other operations can continue though. Oh, and the resupply by land. I would be looking at that. Economic theory should be looking at every country that it may be resupplying by land. Oh, and thank you for hosting Nux. I love Nux.
Armin, we have a few responses, Ali and Jeffrey, for this topic. Unfortunately, I skipped over Treaty, who wanted to speak about the stabbings in London.
Let's do the responses to this one first, and then we could go to that one.
So then first we have Ali.
All right, cool. Okay, so this is what Fox News is reporting today in response to your land point, which is a really good point. So I was talking about this last week too. The countries around that the regime can bypass the blockade with are realistically only Pakistan, Turkey, Armenia. It can't be Turkmenistan. They're completely neutral. Afghanistan has nothing. And all these countries, they just can't because it's on the western side. So Armenia is dragging its feet and kicking its feet at every turn to not help the regime get its oil through to Russia or anything through, actually, for that fact, because they hate Putin, not because they hate the regime. So let's not give them too much credit. But undoubtedly, there are some black market stuff that's happening over there. It's just not going to be in the amount that's going to be significant. Pakistan, yesterday I learned that they are sending a lot of trucks via land into Iran. I don't know what type of aid that is. Could be anything. So we have to consider that fact, but there's nothing we can really do to stop that right now. But when the kinetic strikes start, it'll be probably pretty easy to take care of, and I don't think Pakistan's going to be continuing that support when the kinetic strikes start. But I'm imagining that they're probably sending some sort of aid in return for oil, because their oil economy is actually really bad right now. So yeah, in terms of land, I don't really think it's too much to worry about, just because the amount of stuff that can get through over land is just nowhere near the amount that can get through on water. And if you're worried about the Caspian Sea to get to Russia, I'm very surprised that in the last 15, 20 days that Russia has not collapsed completely. And they have a ton of problems right now. Their ports are pretty much blown to crap. And it's actually caused such a big ecological crisis that this is Chernobyl 2.0, and they're actually using the same exact lines from Chernobyl. They're saying it's not a big deal. We have it under control. Nothing's happening. We're going to evacuate some people, which is exactly what they said at Chernobyl. And this time, there's an oil town city that caught on fire. And that plume of smoke is so large that if you see my cursor, it goes from right here to here. It is literally over 200 miles wide, 400 kilometers wide, and it's pretty much over Kazakhstan right now. And it is killing everything: fish, wildlife, human beings. Everything is dying, and no one's talking about it. But they got their own problems pretty much right now.
Can you put the link to that video in the chat? Thank you. All right, BT, who's next?
To respond, we have Jeffrey.
Real quick, Sketch, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Here's what happened. The Democrats and the Libertarians voted to repeal the AUMF in December of 2025. That's the rule that you would have used to do what you were talking about, at least one of the major tools. So
What is AUMF?
the AUMF was the authorization for the military use of force in direct response to the terrorist attack of September 11th, which allows the United States president to unilaterally use any and all means to go after terrorists that were involved in or are aligned with Al Qaeda that hit us on 9/11. And so part and parcel of that was Hezbollah and Al Quds forces and the IRGC, who was involved in supporting things like Al Qaeda in Iraq. And so that's one of the reasons why that's one of the main citations for striking Maduro. And in response to that, Democrats, Never Trumpers, and Libertarians voted to repeal the AUMF in December of 2025, which is why I call them fucking traitors, because they are. In any case, that means that it's not going to be as clear cut as you're not wrong, Sketch. It's just the tool that you're almost assuredly basing that on was actually stolen by seditionists here, right?
Okay, Ali, are you demodding now? I think Jeffrey, his last word was robot a little bit, but we got the message. But Ali, are you modding? Because no, it's fine. I think we got the message.
Yeah, I can pick it up. Okay, so was there any responses to this? Because I was busy typing. Oh,
Yeah.
she left. Okay, cool. Treaty, would you like to talk about the London stabbing?
No, wait. There was another response to this
was another?
topic. Samantha in the chat.
Oh yeah, Jewish.
And then we go
Yeah,
to
I was gonna say it. I was initially against going after Maduro because I had no idea that there was any connection with Maduro and Hezbollah. So the average American doesn't. If I didn't even know that Hezbollah Shaitan was connected to Maduro, then the average American probably has no freaking idea to this day that there's any connection. Like,
Samantha, they've been connected for years.
know.
This is what. Yeah, but this is why Iranian people hate Maduro. But Samantha, here's an unfortunate thing. You could always assume that the communists are helping the Islamic terrorists. That's the default position that the communists have.
And everything communists are arguing for necessarily helps Islamic terrorists. Like, I had no idea that there was any connection between Maduro and Hezbollah.
Yeah. It goes back years. In fact, back in my channel, in my Persian channel, I debate a lot of mullahs in Persian, and I often were surprised that so many of them were in Latin America. They were like, I assume that the mullahs that I'm talking to, speaking Iranian, debating God with me, I always assume that they're all in Iran, but sometimes they're like, no, I'm actually in Venezuela right now. What the hell? Or different countries in Latin America. What are you doing over there? They're like, oh, I'm spreading Islam. Oh, okay. It's so there's a connection goes deep. I'm spreading Islam and paid by the Islamic Republic to do so. There's like mullahs in Latin America and in Africa, by the way, trying to spread. So this is how it works, right? You don't even talk about Islam, you talk about Hussein. Usually that's how you get in. But you create a base of operations with mosques and Husseinias and talking about Islam, and then slowly you get that base to support Khomeini and the Islamic Republic, and then eventually you create an army or a voting bloc. But it starts with just talking about faith and Islam and anti-imperialism. All right.
All right. Next is Armin.
So
Or, sorry, Treaty.
Treaty, yes, treaty.
Hello guys, thank you for giving me time. I just wanted to tell Jewish community in UK that Iranian stands with you and we support you all the way. We know that every disease has a root cause. No matter how you treat it, the root cause will make it happen again. So the root cause of this, we know what it is and we need to deal with that. And that's why I support this battle that we are doing at present to get rid of the source and the cause of this. I don't feel safe walking in London, not at all. Nobody who's against Islamic regime of Mullah can walk in London feeling safe. Who's safe is the IRGC member and their family feeling absolutely safe in their haven that they have in UK. We need to pressure on UK government and we need to make awareness to UK citizens and publicize as much as we can what's been happening because the media is against us. The only media that talks relevantly neutral and shows the truth is GB News. The rest of them are absolute nonsense. Lily was also being threatened. We know Tusi is being threatened. So many who speaks against violence against Jews or anybody, in fact, they are threatened. And I don't feel safe one bit walking in the streets of London or even in Belfast when we have our rallies and holding Israeli flags. We need to stick together, and I support all the Jews in. And I told you before that I've seen few young one when I visited London, and I stopped them and said thank you, and we support you, and I gave them love to show the difference between the IRG supporters and the no ordinary Iranian people. Thank you.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you, Treaty. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay.
Treaty. We have a question from the chat, which is, I heard something about an alliance with the IRGC and Venezuela concerning uranium. It was mentioned by a pastor on a video I watched a couple months ago. What do you think about an alliance between the IRGC and its proxies and cartels?
So the alliance between the Venezuelan government and the IRGC goes back for a long time. I haven't heard about them anything with regards to uranium. Ali, have you heard about anything? What I've heard is about drugs. It's about selling weapons. It's about economic cooperation. It's about passports. So Venezuelan, like Maduro, gave the Islamic Republic officials passports, and my understanding is Venezuelan passports gets you mobility all around South America, right? So it would basically they come to Venezuela and then use Venezuela as a base of operations to basically try to spread their influence everywhere in South America. That's was yeah. These are the things but it's also a lot about drugs. But I'm not saying this is not true, but I haven't seen uranium, how that connects them. So that's my Jeffrey, have you heard of that? Anything like that?
Back in because I was having connection issues. Can you give me a little bit, just rewind it a little?
The IRGC work with Venezuela on anything uranium related. Do we know?
So there's
Uh.
the level of organization operational ties between the IRGC and their proxies and the transnationalized crime syndicates and previously the Maduro regime took a lot of different forms, not the least of which was drug sales and illicit weapon transfers and the rest of it. I know they talked about it. I know our signal-based intelligence caught some of that. As far as what we found or what we can say with a high degree of confidence, that I can't say because I haven't looked at it, like where it is or where it was right before we took them out. I do know that was things they talked about, and that's actually to the point, the previous point you rightly made, and you had, it was brilliant. I'm so glad you told that to your other members of the anti-mullah diaspora. So the organization operational ties between, say, violent leftists, transnationalized crime syndicates in Central and South America, and Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state or the Mullah regime goes all the way back to the 90s. I'm gonna bring this back to the nuclear weapon question. So in the mid to late 90s, like 96, our single base intelligence out of Florida is listening to all the chatter. And we hear back and forth between transnational organized crime syndicates, specifically narco terrorists in Central and like Northern and South America, and elements of the Russian organized crime syndicates, right? The Bratva. And one of the conversations was, out of a point of curiosity, could the narco terrorists get a ballistic missile submarine, like a Soviet ballistic missile submarine? And the corrupt member of the Bratva said, "Do you want one with missiles or without?" And the reason that's significant is because later on we actually found a Russian sub in the middle of the fucking jungle. So why did I say that? The historical precedent between narco terrorists and or like things like the Maduro regime investing in high-end strategic weaponry is not without historical precedent.
So I looked this up as well to see what we could add to that. What I'm getting is this: historically, the IRGC and the Venezuelan government have been accused of collaborating on uranium prospecting, though verified evidence of actual mining or transfers remains scarce. From 2009 to 2010, there are allegations, the intelligence reports and diplomatic cables leaked via WikiLeaks indicated that Iran and Venezuela signed agreements to explore uranium deposits in the Amazonas states. So apparently these are states within Venezuela. IRGC involvement, the IRGC linked construction firm Khatam al-Anbiya. Oh my God, Khatam al-Anbiya was involved in Venezuela. Khatam al-Anbiya was suspected of using front companies for mining exploration under the guise of cement factories or housing projects. And the current status is, while the IRGC, specifically the Quds Force, maintains a heavy presence in Venezuela, managing oil for gold swaps, a drone assembly, and security, there has been no public verified confirmation that they successfully extracted or shipped uranium for Iran's nuclear program. We do have, but I also here recent with regards to drugs though, recent U.S. intelligence and 2025-2026 legal designations link the IRGC Quds Force to Venezuelan cartel of the Sun. That the collaboration functions as a criminal terrorist pipeline where narcotics revenue is used to fund IRGC operations and bypass international sanctions, leading to the US designating the Venezuelan cartel as a foreign terrorist organization in late 2025. Okay. So that's the answer. All right.
All right. Next is me.